I was in the middle of a pitch call with 3 investors from Boston when my brother walked through the front door of my office like he owned the place. I didn't hear him come in. My assistant Penny tried to stop him. I found out later she actually stepped in front of him and said, "Sir, she's in a meeting." He told her to move. Just like that. Move. Like she was furniture. I was mid-sentence explaining our Q3 projections when the conference room door swung open and he was just standing there. My brother. In a suit he definitely didn't own the last time I saw him, which was 3 years ago at my mother's birthday dinner, where he told me in front of the whole table that my company was a phase and that I'd be back asking Dad for money before I turned 30. I didn't look up from my laptop right away. I finished my sentence. I said, "Excuse me one moment," muted myself and looked at him. "We need to talk," he said. "I'm on a call." "It can wait." I looked at him for a long second. He had that expression I'd known my whole life, the one that said he'd already decided how this conversation was going to go, and my job was just to catch up. I unmuted myself, apologized to the investors, asked for 10 minutes, and closed the laptop. That was the beginning of the worst week of my life, and also, eventually, the best. My name is Leah, and I built my company from a folding table in a studio apartment. That's not a metaphor. I actually had a folding table. I bought it at a garage sale for $12, and for 2 years it was my desk, my dining table, and occasionally my bed when I fell asleep working. The apartment was in a part of Portland that my father once described as the kind of neighborhood where ambition goes to die. He said that to my face. I was 24. I started a tech-enabled home staging company. We used augmented reality to let real estate agents virtually stage empty properties for listings, which sounds niche until you realize how much agents pay to physically stage a house and how often listings sit because buyers can't visualize a space. Within 18 months, I had 12 clients. Within 3 years, I had a team of 9 and contracts with 2 of the largest regional brokerages in the Pacific Northwest. Last spring, we closed a seed round that put us at a $4.2 million valuation. My family knew about the company the way you know about weather in a city you've never visited. Technically aware, not particularly interested. My father had built his own business, a regional HVAC company that my brother was supposed to take over someday, which meant my brother had spent his entire adult life assuming a future had already been arranged for him. My mother ran the household and ran interference for my father and ran my brother's ego like a full-time job. I was the youngest. I was the daughter. I was the one who left. When I moved to Portland at 22, my father told me he wouldn't help me if I failed. My mother told me she hoped I knew what I was doing. My brother laughed and said, "Let us know when you're ready to come back to the real world." I didn't go home for Christmas that first year, or the second. By the third year, I was too busy to feel the sting of it, or at least that's what I told myself. We communicated through my mother mostly. She'd call on Sunday nights and give me updates I hadn't asked for. My brother's new truck, my father's golf handicap, the neighbor's renovation project. I'd tell her things were going well. She'd say, "That's nice, honey," in the specific tone that meant she didn't entirely believe me. Then we'd hang up and I'd go back to work. I hadn't spoken directly to my father in almost 2 years when my brother walked through my office door. He sat down across from me without being invited to and put his elbows on the table the way he always had, like every room he entered was already his. "Mom and Dad want to meet," he said. "Okay. With you. About the company." I waited. "Dad's retiring next year. He wants to transition the HVAC business to me, but he also—" My brother paused, recalibrated. "We've been talking, as a family, about opportunities." "What kind of opportunities?" "Dad thinks there's a real synergy between what you're doing in the home services space. Real estate staging, HVAC, home improvement. It's all connected. He wants to talk about coming on in some kind of advisory capacity, bringing the family together under one umbrella." I kept my face very still. I had learned to do this over many years of practice. "He also," my brother continued, "thinks it would make sense for me to come on as a co-founder, given the family connection and his network." There it was. "You want to co-found a position," I said, "in the company I built. We think it would be mutually beneficial." You've never worked in tech. You don't have a background in real estate. You've spent the last 6 years working for Dad's HVAC company, which gives me extensive experience in home services, which is directly relevant. My company does augmented reality software for real estate listings, not HVAC installation. He looked at me the way he had my entire life, patient, patronizing, as if my failure to agree with him was a charming but temporary condition. Leah, he said, you're growing fast, but you're small. Dad has relationships in the city that took him 40 years to build. His name opens doors. You need capital. You need connections. I just closed a seed round. He blinked. 4.2 million, I said, announced last month. The pause was brief, but satisfying. That's great, he said, recovering. That's exactly why now is the right time to structure something formal. Investors respond to stability, having family involved, a co-founder with. I have a co-founder. Her name is Priya. She's been with me since year 1. Another pause. Longer this time. I think, he said carefully, you should at least meet with Mom and Dad before you make any decisions. I haven't made any decisions. You came to my office without an appointment and pitched me on giving you equity in my company. I'm just responding to what you actually said. He stood up. He straightened his jacket. That same movement he'd been doing since high school, the one that meant he was about to say something he considered final. Mom's not doing great, he said. She's been having some health stuff. She misses you. I think it would mean a lot to her if you came home. I looked at him. That's a separate conversation, I said, and you know it. He left without saying goodbye. I called Priya that evening and told her everything. She listened without interrupting, which is one of the many reasons she's the best business partner I could have asked for. When I finished, he said co-founder. Yes. Not advisor, not consultant, co-founder. Yes. Of a company he has never been involved with, never invested in, never contributed to in any way. Correct. Okay, she took a breath. What do you want to do? I don't know yet, but I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. I was right. 2 weeks later, my mother called, not on a Sunday night, on a Tuesday morning, while I was in the middle of reviewing contracts. She never called on weekdays. I need to talk to you about the family, she said. She sounded tired and oddly formal, like she was reading from something. She told me she and my father had been doing a lot of thinking, that they felt the distance between us had gone on too long, that they wanted to reconnect as a family, and that they hoped I would be willing to come to the table in good faith. In good faith about what? I asked. About the proposal your brother brought to you. I set down my pen. Mom, I said slowly, did you know about that meeting before he came? A pause. We thought it would be better coming from him first. I closed my eyes. We all think, she continued, that this could be really special. Your father's name, your brother's drive, your company. My company. Could be something the whole family is proud of. Your father has contacts at every major real estate developer in the region. He could open doors for you that. I have investors. I have contracts. I have a team. I built this without any of you. You don't have to say it like that. Like what? Like an accusation. I sat there for a moment with the phone against my ear, listening to her breathe. Mom, I said, 3 years ago, Dad told me he wouldn't bail me out when I failed. He didn't say if. He said when. And now that I haven't failed, now that I've actually built something real, you want a piece of it, and you're using your health and family guilt to get me to the table. I see what this is. The silence stretched. Your father is going to call you, she said finally. I hope you'll listen. He called that afternoon. My father's voice on the phone was the same as it always was, controlled, deliberate, the voice of a man who believed that volume was for people who hadn't yet learned to make rooms go quiet just by speaking. He didn't apologize for the ambush meeting with my brother. He didn't acknowledge the 3-year silence. He started, instead, with the offer. He had done some research, he said. He understood the staging software space. He had reached out to a few of his contacts, developers, brokers, People who moved significant real estate in the Portland metro area and gauged interest. He believed that with his network and my technology, we could double our enterprise client base within 18 months. In exchange, he said, we'd want a meaningful stake, something that reflects the value we'd be bringing in. 35% split between myself and your brother. 35%, I repeated. We think that's fair given you want more than a third of my company, a company you've never invested in, a company you told me was going to fail. I never said that. You said when I failed, not if. A pause. That was a long time ago. I was concerned about you. That's different from Dad. I took a breath. I have investors, I have a board. I cannot offer 35% of my company to family members with no relevant experience without triggering major issues with my existing shareholders. That's not me saying no to you personally. That's just how equity works. Then restructure. I'm not restructuring my company to hand equity to people who want it based on a last name. Another silence. When he spoke again, his voice had cooled by several degrees. You've always had a chip on your shoulder about this family, he said. I hope your investors are better company than we were. He hung up. I thought that was the end of it. I thought we'd go back to the polite distance, the Sunday calls through my mother, the birthday texts. I thought I'd made myself clear and they'd retreated. I was wrong. 3 weeks later, one of my best clients, a brokerage called Summit Realty, called to tell me they were reconsidering their contract renewal. Their managing broker, a man I'd had a great relationship with for 2 years, sounded uncomfortable and vague. He said they'd received some concerns about my company's stability and leadership. He couldn't tell me where the concerns came from, but he suggested I should get my house in order. The next day, a broker I'd been in talks with for weeks suddenly went cold, then another. I started making calls. And slowly, across several conversations, a pattern emerged. Someone had been reaching out to contacts in the Portland real estate community, people who knew my father, and suggesting that my company was a risky bet, that the founding team had internal conflicts, that there were questions about my long-term commitment to the business. My father's network being used to strangle mine. I sat in my car in the parking lot of a coffee shop for about 45 minutes after I figured it out. Not crying, just sitting there with the engine off, thinking about what it means when the people who are supposed to want you to succeed are the ones making sure you don't. Then I went back to the office and I called our attorney. Her name was Carolyn, and she'd spent 15 years in business litigation before pivoting to startup counsel. She had a way of speaking that made you feel like the situation was always more manageable than your nervous system believed. I walked her through everything. The meetings, the calls, my father's network, the clients who had suddenly gone cold. Do you have any documentation? She asked. I have the email from Summit Realty. I have texts from 2 brokers who told me what they'd heard. I have call logs. And the source your father, are there any direct communications where he references this? No, he's careful. Okay, she made a note. Here's where you are. What they're doing could potentially constitute tortious interference with business relationships. If we can establish that your father deliberately contacted your clients with the intent to damage your contractual relationships, and that it actually caused harm, that's actionable. The challenge is causation and documentation. What do I do in the meantime? Contact every client personally. Don't mention your family. Address the stability concern directly. Walk them through your financials, your investor backing, your roadmap. Let the facts do the work. And my father? She paused. I'd recommend a cease and desist letter, formally documented, sent to him and your brother. It puts them on notice that you're aware of what's happening and that you're prepared to pursue legal remedies. Often that's enough. And if it isn't, then we file. The letter was sent on a Thursday morning. By Thursday afternoon, my mother had called 3 times. I let them go to voicemail. By Friday, my brother had texted. This is insane. You're really going to sue your own family over a business? I didn't respond. What I did instead, I spent the next 2 weeks doing what Carolyn advised. I called every active client personally. I sent a company update, clean, professional, data-driven, to every contact in our pipeline. I leaned on Priya, who was extraordinary, who made calls I couldn't make and said things in meetings I couldn't say without my voice shaking. And I leaned on the investors. I told them what was happening. All of it. I expected concern, maybe weariness. What I got was something else. Our lead investor, a woman named Gretchen who had built and sold 2 SaaS companies before she turned 40, said, "Family interference with founders is more common than you'd think. The fact that you identified it, documented it, and responded legally and professionally, that's actually a green flag for me." Then she made 3 introductions. 2 of them turned into client conversations. One of those is now our largest enterprise contract. My father called me 6 weeks after the cease and desist. I answered because I thought it would be worse not to. He didn't apologize, not directly. He said he'd perhaps been too aggressive in how he'd approached things. He said he'd reached out to some contacts to explore opportunities and maybe hadn't been as careful with framing as he should have been. He said he hoped I could understand that he was coming from a place of wanting to help the family. "Dad," I said, "you made calls to my clients suggesting my company was unstable. I lost 2 contracts. One client relationship that I'd spent 14 months building went cold in a week. I didn't say anything that wasn't true. You implied things that weren't true. You implied internal conflict in my founding team. Priya and I have never had a conflict. You implied questions about my commitment. I have worked 7 days a week for 4 years to build this company. You made things up, Dad. You made them up because I said no to you." Silence. "I hope," I said, "that was worth it." I hung up. Here's the part I didn't expect. The broker had gone coldest, the one I'd been in talks with for the longest, the one whose hesitation had hurt the most, called me 8 weeks after all of this started. He'd done his own research, he said. He'd talked to some of my existing clients. He'd looked at our metrics in our investor profile. "I want to revisit the conversation," he said. "I should have done my homework before I listened to what I was hearing." We signed a contract the following month. Summit Realty renewed. The client Gretchen connected me with came on board with a 12-month agreement that was larger than anything we'd signed before. And my brother's involvement in my father's HVAC company, the succession plan that had been in the works for years, hit a complication I only heard about secondhand through a cousin who still talked to both sides of the family. Apparently, the business had taken out a loan using some of my brother's personal assets as collateral, and when a major commercial contract fell through in the fall, things got difficult. My father, who had positioned himself as the one with the network and the relationships and the 40 years of credibility, had to call in every favor he had just to restructure the debt. I didn't gloat. That's not what this is. But I did think about what my brother said to me when I left home at 22. "Let us know when you're ready to come back to the real world." I thought about the folding table, the studio apartment, the $12 garage sale desk where I worked until my eyes stopped focusing. I thought about what it means to build something from nothing. In a city where no one knows your last name, with no safety net and no network handed to you and no one making calls on your behalf. And then I went back to work. My mother texted me 2 months ago. She said she missed me. She said she hoped we could have dinner sometime, just the 2 of us. She said she knew things had gotten complicated and she was sorry for her part in it. I read the text 3 times. I didn't respond right away. I let it sit for 4 days and I thought about it honestly. Not angrily, just honestly. I texted back, "I'd like that. Let's find a time." We haven't scheduled it yet, but I think we will. My father hasn't reached out. My brother sent a happy Thanksgiving text in November that I read and didn't answer. Maybe someday that will change. Maybe it won't. What I know is this. I spent years thinking that if I just succeeded enough, clearly enough, undeniably enough, the people who doubted me would come around. I thought success was a language everyone eventually learns to speak. What I've learned is that some people will always see your success as something that was taken from them rather than something you earned. And the moment you understand that, really understand it in your body, not just your head, you stop trying to prove anything to them. You just build. And you let the work speak for itself in a language that doesn't require anyone's approval to be true. I still think about that folding table sometimes. The $12 one from the garage sale with the wobbly left leg I fixed with a folded piece of cardboard. I spent more hours at that table than I spent sleeping in my 20s, and not once did anyone in my family call to ask how it was going. That's not bitterness. It's just the truth. And I've had to learn the difference between those two things because they can feel identical when you're sitting in a parking lot with the engine off, trying to understand why the people who were supposed to root for you are the ones making calls behind your back. What I keep coming back to is this. My father didn't set out to be cruel. He set out to be right. There's a kind of person who needs the world to confirm their predictions more than they need the people around them to thrive. My father predicted I would fail. When I didn't, the only way to protect that prediction was to find some way to make it true. So he made calls, he planted doubts, he used 40 years of relationships as a weapon against the daughter he'd never bothered to understand. That's what I mean when I say actions have consequences that travel further than we intend. He thought he was protecting something, his pride, his authority, some version of the family order where he remained the one people called for help. What he actually did was document, in the clearest possible way, exactly who he was willing to become when things didn't go his way. And once you see that about a person, you can't unsee it. Priya saw it immediately, by the way. She said this isn't about the company. This was never about the company. She was right. It was about the fact that I had built something real without asking permission, and that made me dangerous to a story my family had been telling about me for years. What carried me through wasn't anger. Anger burned out pretty fast, honestly. What stayed was something quieter. The decision to keep doing the right thing even when it would have been easier to lash out. To call Carolyn instead of calling my brother back. To tell my investors the truth instead of hiding it. To reach back out to every client professionally, with facts, without dragging anyone's name through the mud. I didn't do those things because I'm noble. I did them because I understood, somewhere along the way, that how you respond to being wronged ends up being more defining than the wrong itself. And then there was the thinking, the actual hard work of figuring out what was happening, who was doing it, why, and what the legal and strategic options were. I'm proud of that, not in a showy way, just quietly proud that I didn't panic, didn't go numb, didn't hand the narrative to someone else. I sat down, I thought it through, and then I acted. That's a skill I built the same way I built the company, slowly, imperfectly, by failing at it first. Gretchen told me that the way I handled it was a green flag. I've thought about that phrase a lot. Because I think what she was really saying is, character shows up most clearly under pressure. Not who you are when things are going well, but who you are when someone is actively trying to take something from you. I don't know what happens next with my family. I texted my mother back, we haven't had dinner yet. Maybe we will. Maybe things will be different, or maybe they'll be the same and I'll just be clearer about what I can and cannot expect. What I know is that the work continues. The table, a proper one now, not a garage sale find, is still where I spend most of my hours. And that's enough. That has always been enough.